that have always been swimming against the mainstream of fame and fortune of every culture. So
Yes.
I don't think it's any different now than it was 2,500 years ago during the time of the Buddha, when his family wanted him to be a good king, and he decided to be a spiritual leader instead.
Yeah.
In both today and then, possessions and fame and wealth were always the biggest thing that mattered, and always have been in every culture. So I think for us, if we recognize that our spiritual practice generally runs countercurrent to what people are advocating in the culture.
Yes.
And that's some comfort, and I think it's also important, and the work that I do with people is to help them integrate their spiritual awakening with their actual lives, because there's nothing wrong with making money. There is something wrong with feeling like you don't belong in an organization, or feeling like it's a dog-eat-dog and that you have to be hateful towards your coworkers. That's not a good environment. But if you can create a positive environment in which you are successful and do something useful, I'm not talking about making weapons, I'm talking about doing something useful for humanity,
right.
And there's nothing wrong with succeeding and paying attention to how, no matter how you succeed, you never get enough. And that's that never getting enough feeling, whether you're on the meditation cushion, never getting enough enlightenment, or whether you're at your job, never getting enough promotions and never getting enough salary, you have the same feeling of striving and imbalance. And so it's that you're working on, and it doesn't matter how you work on it so much, as long as you're not harming others.
Right, of course. That's very nice. You mentioned Buddha and his parents. You know a little bit about, I don't know much about his mother, and his stepmother was key to his development too, wasn't she? Can you tell us something about his... Yeah, please.
Yes, so his mother died within, I think maybe it was about a week after he was born, so he never really knew his mother. His stepmother, who was also his mother's sister, so she was his aunt, and she was his stepmother.
Okay.
She was also, at the time that she became his stepmother and took care of him as an infant, she was the second wife to the same man that her older sister had been married to. So this is a very complicated family dynamic. So she had her share of difficulty in that her sister and she shared the same husband. He was also, her husband, the Buddha's father, had a harem of women. There was always kind of jealousy among women who are in that situation and are using their powers of seduction to ensure the survival of themselves and their young.
Right.
And she also was a witness to what happened to women when they were no longer attractive and were, nobody cared about them once they were done being in the harem. So they, were sort of human trash. So she was very sensitive to these issues. I don't know, there isn't much written about how she coached or taught the Buddha as his mother or stepmother or aunt, but there was, she was one of the first people that he met when he returned to his home village after his spiritual awakening, and she asked him, she was one of the first of his family members to ask him if she too could follow the same path. And so did his wife, who he abandoned. He abandoned his wife and newborn son when he went off on a spiritual journey. And so it was his wife and his stepmother who asked him for ordination. And because of the cultural complexity and the submissive position of women in the Hindu culture of the day, he said he could not do that. Now, it's not quite clear what happened. This was 2,500 years ago. It's possible that he did give them ordination, but did not allow them to leave home and to practice as homeless monks or nuns. And so the story goes that his stepmother, Mahapajapati, his aunt and stepmother, led a group of women on a walk of hundreds of miles until their feet were bloody. Following him, they shaved their heads, they put on the robes, and they joined him where he was with his monks, and once more requested to leave home and become full-fledged members of the Buddhist community.
Wow.
And there is a passage that is recorded that probably isn't true, but it's fun for the story, which is his cousin, Ananda, said to him, why is your stepmother crying? What's going on? He said, don't bother me with this, the Buddha said. Don't bug me with this. She's already asked me if women could be ordained, and I'm not going to allow it. And so the rule was in those days that you could ask 3 times. So his cousin Ananda asked him 3 times if he would ordain women, and when he refused for the 3rd time, then he was not allowed to ask anymore. So he asked another question. And the other question was to the Buddha, can women attain the same liberation and enlightenment that men can? And at this point, the Buddha, the story we're told is the Buddha said, yes, they can, and okay, we'll admit them, but they will always be submissive to the male order. And so this has been a problem for women in that they did select to be ordained, and the only condition that Mahapajapati objected to was that the most senior nun would always be junior to the most junior monk. So she objected to this, but when the Buddha would not relent, supposedly he didn't, and we don't even know if he said this during his lifetime, but that's the way the Buddhist patriarchy has passed on this information. The Buddha said so women will never have equal status to men in Buddhist tradition. Now, this has been the case in the Theravadan tradition, the old style of Buddhism, in Southeast Asia, in Burma, in Thailand, and various countries. But, in fact, the women's order died out because it took 10 nuns and 10 monks to ordain a woman, and once there were no more nuns, they said, well, you can't get there from here. We can't ordain anymore. Now, what has happened recently is that Westerners have begun within the Thai tradition, Westerners who are highly placed in the Thai tradition have begun to ordain women, and they've been excommunicated by the Buddhist authorities in Thailand, the teachers. So it's become quite an issue in our time. I never thought I would see it in my lifetime, that this order that has been lost of the old-style Buddhist nuns being revived. And people saying, well, guess what? Everything changes, and so we're ordaining women.
That's great.
Yeah, no, we've even had ordinations here in California.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and in Australia, in Perth, Australia. And some of the Buddhist teachers, even the Asian Buddhist teachers, are supporting it. But so far the authorities in that old style of Buddhism, Theravadan tradition, is not supporting it. In the Mahayana tradition, of which Zen is a part, the women have had a continuous lineage and have not, outside of Asia, have not observed the submissiveness to men. So particularly in the West, we see a very vibrant women's order with 50% of Buddhist teachers in the Mahayana, in the Zen tradition, and in the Pure Land tradition being women. In the Tibetan tradition, we still see that this is mostly dominated by men because it comes from Tibet, and the Tibetans are all reincarnated tulkus, and no woman in her right mind, nobody in their right mind wants to be reincarnated as a woman, so, in Tibet. So these are all men that are pretty much, there are a few nuns, but the nuns order never took root in Tibet. So we do have the nuns order in Zen, and we are beginning to get it back in the old style Theravadan Buddhism.
Well, now, if they believe in reincarnation, couldn't they conceive that they, as men, have been in various other lifetimes, they had been incarnated as women?
Yeah, but they feel that that's a punishment. If you're really bad, you're coming back. It's really bad. You come back as a woman. That was the Hindu belief.
Oh my!
And, being reborn as a woman is a definite no-no. And if you go anywhere in the world and you see women and children living in poverty, you know it's not the best plan. I haven't figured out why I did it this lifetime, but I'm still working on that.
Yeah, interesting. Wow, the belief systems that hold up.
Yeah, it's a closed circuit.
Yes, exactly.
You can't get at it, and so they say, well, when they find these tulkus, they're always men. Well, of course, because that's the way it is. And I myself, believe that some of these teachers may come back, and it would be a real hardship for them if they came back as a woman in their culture.
Think about the spiritual growth.
Yeah. Well, they would have a lot of spiritual growth, but they wouldn't be able to offer their teaching.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Someone would have to break through the mold and become another Buddha, only a female version of it, I suppose.
Yeah. She might or might not ever get any airtime.
Right, exactly. Well, even if Christ came back today, he'd probably be arrested and put to death again right away for his crazy belief.
Yeah, they probably put him on antipsychotics first.
First, yes, exactly. And then maybe on the Oprah show, I don't know. But anyway, levity aside, when you did your research for the book about these various women, did you have anything, did you come across anything that surprised you or that you found particularly interesting that you'd like to share?
Well, I think the thing that surprised me most was when I put together a timeline. There wasn't ever a time when women weren't practicing and really offering some very deep teachings throughout these 2,500 years of Buddhism. So I was surprised. When Zen first came to the West, in the 50s and the 60s for the beatniks and the hippies, we never knew anything about the female tradition because in Asia, the teachers who came over from Japan had studied in Asia where men and women were segregated, and they didn't really know too many nuns, and they hadn't really been familiar with the nuns' practice. So I didn't even know there were any women, never mind that there was a continuous stream from the time of the Buddha through India, China, Korea, and Japan, and other countries in Vietnam, that women practiced and made large contributions to.
Well, in a way, it wouldn't be surprising because I've heard the same thing from those who are scholars in the Egyptian research, and they talk about the female priestesses and the many years of peace that existed during that time, and the mystery schools and various tantric schools, and so on and so forth. And so there's always been a kind of an undercurrent or hidden female line that's kind of been a current underneath, and the men have been riding the waves and the heroes and the rest of it, but the real strong current that's holding it up has often been the female presence, the divine feminine.
Well, yes, there's the divine feminine, and then there's all the women who offered their worldly influence and support. The queens and the empresses in Asia, who were big supporters of Buddhist practice and built many temples. And the women of wealth and influence used their influence to support Buddhism. I think the most surprising story for me was the story of Tokeiji Temple in Japan, which was started around the 13th century by women of the shogun's family and imperial family of the emperor. And these women became ordained and abbesses and used all of their influence and power to rescue women who were in abusive marriages from their husbands. There was no legal recourse to divorce. So for 500 years, for women, men could get divorces, but women couldn't. And